Hello and welcome to the Two Guy One Roto Show. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for joining us again this week. Rich, hello, how are you?
I'm great. Glad to be back.
Glad to do it with you again, man. Glad to do the show. This is going to be our first and probably only for this season non-fantasy show, but we are absolutely certain that you're going to love it. What we're doing this week is the AL and NL previews, basically. Who's going to win the divisions, who's going to win the wild cards, who's going to win the leagues, who's going to win the World Series. And then we're also, because we like to have negative things on our show, like previous guests used to say, we like to, we're going to crap on a team also, like somebody who's got high expectations maybe and is not going to live up to them. So that ought to be fun. As always, our show is brought to you by the good folks at FantasySixpack.net. Once again, we're delighted to welcome a special guest to our show. But as usual, I can't recommend it enough. I've been beating this into the ground. I'm going to continue doing it until everybody's signed up. But I can't recommend it highly enough. If you're playing fantasy baseball, move your league to Fantrax right now. Opening day is 2 days away. You got time. Do it right this second. It's absolutely incredible. The platform is second to none. And you can join for free right now using fantrax.com/fantasy6pack. So if you're listening to the show on either Apple or Spotify, please go ahead and give us a like and a subscribe. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, same thing. You can follow us on either Twitter or Blue Sky. You can see our handles right here on the show. I'm at DW the Original, and Rich is?
I am at RSAYRE04.
So without further ado, we'd like to welcome to the show from Baseball Prospectus, Mr. Craig Goldstein. Mr. Craig Goldstein, welcome. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Craig. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Excellent. So I trust you're doing better than Mookie Betts. How about that?
I could use the weight loss that apparently came with whatever he's doing, but I'd like to keep my solid foods down.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend his weight loss program.
Yeah, I don't want the program, but I take the results probably.
I was actually joking with my manager in my my real life job, so to speak, that he's a big Dodgers fan, and I was joking that in and amongst, not to get off on a vaccine tangent or whatever, but in and amongst the anti-vax, stuff that's going on right now and whatever, like who knows what we've released. Like Mookie Betts might be suffering from some like flesh-eating disease that also just so happened to coincide with the polio vaccine, or whatever. And nobody even knew it was out there, but whatever. Anyway, hopefully not. We love Mookie Betts. Hopefully he's going to be great, and he'll be back to smashing baseballs and bowling strikes real soon. So anyway. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the junior circuit first. We're going to give our American League East, Central, and West winners and kind of why we think they're going to win the divisions. We're going to talk about the wild cards after that. Then we'll move on to the National League, and then we'll talk about the American League Championship series, the teams that are participating, the winners from each of those series, and then who's going to win the World Series. And then, like I mentioned at the intro, we're going to end with the team that's going to disappoint for whatever reason. The team that is going to surprisingly, unfortunately, finish worse than maybe their fans are hoping. And maybe chat about that a little bit. So, Craig, our custom is to let our guests go first if you would care to, or you can pass. You can pass on that responsibility. It's pretty heavy weight on your shoulders, I'm sure. But you want to go ahead and give us your American League East winner?
Sure. I'm actually going against our projection system
Okay.
here. I think the Red Sox are going to be the AL East winners.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I actually wrote our Red Sox preview for the site, and I think there's a lot going on in Boston that the projection system, it's just set up. I don't want to say set up to fail exactly, but they're set up to potentially overperform it quite a bit. So we had a lot of playing time at the time, probably still do, for Ceddanne Rafaela, who may be fine, but doesn't project particularly well. He had a really rough year last year offensively, obviously quite good defensively, but he did see a lot of that time at shortstop where he wasn't particularly good. He's an incredible center fielder. But the projections for him aren't particularly good. If they're as bad as our projection system thinks he'll be, they won't play him, right? And so but we know that they're planning to play him a fair amount, and the projection sees him as what it sees him, and so they tend to lose a lot of credit in a situation like that. They also just have a lot of unsettled things. At the time the projections that we ran our preview, Christian Campbell was not the second baseman. We didn't know who was going to be the second baseman. Alex Bregman had some time there. Campbell had some time there. Vaughn Grissom had some time there. Sedana Rafaela had some time there, right? There's a lot of kind of a mishmash going on at the position. Look, they're going to Campbell early. If it doesn't work, they have other options, but we expect him to be very, very good. He was our number 3 prospect overall entering the season, and number 2 prospect in their system behind Anthony. We think he's going to be really good, but again, that wasn't something the system had set up at the time of the projection. And even if we change that tomorrow, it's not going to move the needle drastically.
Right.
And so, and their depth just plays into this really well, in that if someone isn't performing, they can turn to someone else, and we have to split up that time as hazard a guess at it. But the Red Sox will be able to move on either quicker or know someone or have more information on whether someone's likely to rebound, from a poor performance or something like that. And I also think their depth in terms of their prospects, I mentioned Anthony and Campbell, but they have a lot more beyond that, means that they can acquire something to change, mid-season when it comes to the deadline. If they need another arm, if they need a top flight bullpen piece, if they need something else, in either in the outfield or in the infield, they have the pieces to go and get it. And so I think that's another place that they can outperform something that we're using just their current roster and current system to base an entire season projection on. So I think there are a lot of reasons. I think they could end up the most complete team in the AL this year. They're not there now, but
wide open field, right?
Yeah, it's a very wide open field. I don't love basically any team in the AL. And I think, they have the opportunity with the Crochet acquisition, with all these prospects potentially filling in the cracks or being sent out for someone who can, to be. I don't think they're going to be a juggernaut or anything, but I do think by season's end they have the opportunity to be the most complete team.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there you go. Rich, I know that pick was near and dear to your heart, being a Red Sox fan yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and go next to potentially break up back-to-back Red Sox picks. I'm not sure who you're picking, but I have an inkling that you might be picking them as well. My pick is the Tampa Bay Rays, or the New York South Rays, whatever you want to call them. But I don't know. I just feel like this is a team that doesn't have any real significant holes, except for the fact that they also don't have any real significant stars. Right? Unless if Junior Caminero is the truth. I wrote in my Dynasty article, I guess we will touch on fantasy a little bit, that Eddie Matthews, once upon a time in his age 21 season, had like a 7-win season, and Junior Caminero is coming into that. Not to say he's going to do that, but never know. And if Shane McClanahan doesn't miss too much time, their bullpen is absolutely wicked, using a Boston term there. And so the East is suddenly looking mighty vulnerable. I would agree that on paper, I think Boston does look like the best team. But I think that just Tampa, especially once they get Kim back, they just kind of just chip away at you without missing a beat, so to speak, right? Every day they're putting somebody out there who's, at least comparable to whoever you're putting out there, kind of thing. So anyway, so that's my pick for the East, is the Tampa Bay Rays. Mr. Sayre, would you care to give us your pick or any thoughts, or gentlemen, anything like that?
I'd love to, yeah. So I actually had the Rays second in the division. I think actually all the top 4 teams are going to be in the mix-ish. The Blue Jays are not one of those teams. But for me, I ended up going with the Red Sox, and I think it's a number of things that Craig hit on. I like the depth that they have. I like the options that they have in the minors, whether that be for reinforcements in the season directly via promotion or via trades for other items that they need. I think they're a lot better foundationally than they were last year. There were times last year when they were surging, and there were times when they were slumping. The pitching is a lot better this year than last year. There are definitely injury question marks there with Crochet, with Buehler, with Giolito. But even with that, I think they have a lot better depth in the starting rotation than they had last year. Bullpen, we'll see what happens. But overall, I think they're the most balanced team. I think they have the most upside as well. So they have guys like Casas that could really take off. Story could bounce back. Rafaela, even we talked about a little bit, he could take a step forward. And then you have the prospects, the big three. I think maybe more Anthony and Campbell to start the season, but Mayer's been looking good in spring training as well. So, there's just a lot there, and I think they're the most complete team in the division. I do like the Rays. I am not sold on the offense there. I think it's more of a mediocre type of lineup. Camaneros looked great in the spring. Wyatt Langford looked great in the spring last year, and he didn't have the season. We were hoping for him to have. A lot of the rookies last year struggled. So I just don't see a depth to the lineup. I love the starting rotation. I still like it, even depending on what happens with McClanahan. And then, they've always got guys in the bullpen. Like, you almost don't even need to look at that. You feel like that's going to be a lock. So I like the Rays also. I think they're a dangerous team, but I went with the Red Sox.
Fair enough. Yeah. The Red Sox, you guys both echoed a sentiment of Craig, I don't know if you were around for when Jason Parks was working at Prospectus, but he was famous for saying that prospects are currency. You can use them to spend on your major league roster. You can use them to spend to augment your major league roster. And I would agree with both of you guys that the Red Sox probably have the best currency of almost any team out there. Maybe the Orioles in the East, in other words, as far as to go out and acquire new talent. The Orioles seem reticent to do that, so we'll see. Yeah. But anyway. All right, we want to move on to the Central, gentlemen?
Sure.
All right, who you got for us in the Central, Mr. Craig?
I have the Twins, so I'm sticking with the same. That's what Pacoda has. I think this is a pretty wide open division. I think we're going to say this about every single division here. So I'm not. It wouldn't surprise me if we're all over the map on this one. But I think it's easy to overlook exactly how injured the Twins were last year. I mean, the number of guys that went down, and some of that is just how they built their roster, right? I mean, that's like some of that is like saying, oh, well, the Dodgers pitchers are all hurt. Well, yeah, they get guys who get hurt, right? I mean, that's part of their model. When you have Carlos Correa and Royce Lewis and Byron Buxton, you're going to end up hurt. But they were hurt beyond that, and had a lot of underperformance along with it. Matt Wallner was so bad for a while; he got sent down. He was so good in the second half; he ended up with a 900 plus OP or high 800s OPS. But Edouard Julien, people thought was going to be very good. He was pretty bad. They had to replace him. They did have some things go right. Willie Castro was an all-star, which is hard to believe, but he was. But I do think, again, they Bailey Ober got hurt. Joe Ryan got hurt. Some of that is going to happen, but they do have a lot of arms to throw out there in the rotation, including in the minors. They're not necessarily the sexiest names or the highest ranked prospects, but they're all kind of competent in a way. We saw Zebby Matthews fly through the minors. David Festa is up here. Again, not anyone who's going to blow your mind, but they have guys who can backfill for when some of these guys either need to take a time off through the rotation or get hurt for if it's not too serious. And I think along with the Rays, the Twins do an incredible job with their bullpen. They always have some hard throwers. They've turned up a number of guys. Yohan Duran obviously is the guy everyone thinks of, but Griffin Jax is a monster out of the pen, and people might not pay a lot of attention to a non-closer out of Minnesota, but he's really, really good out there. And I just think
believer in baseball.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is a team, again, I focus a lot on balance in terms of what they're able to offer out of the starting rotation, the lineup and the bullpen. And all of these teams in the Central are going to be flawed. And while the injury risk remains real, and we're seeing it already, right? I mean, Royce Lewis got hurt. Brooks Lee, another guy who should be able to backfill, already hurt. But they do have Miranda as well. They have a number of guys that can kind of move around and backfill. And so I just think on balance, like on pure talent, they have the best answer kind of all over. And while some of those guys aren't always going to be on the field, I think I just have to I have to think they're not going to be as hurt as they were last year, and that's going to help them win out. It was a really bad year. It was a really good year for some of these other teams. But when I look at, for example, like the Royals, talk about injury luck. They used 6 starting pitchers last year, and that was by choice. They could have used 5, but they replaced Alec Marsh with Michael Lorenzen mid-season at the deadline. But that was it. I mean, and they were all healthy the whole year. And I just don't know that you're going to get the same number of starts out of those guys, and the depth beyond the starting rotation in Kansas City is basically Noah Cameron, and that's it. So if they suffer 2 injuries, it's really ugly, really fast. And I think you go down basically every team, and Cleveland is my like they can't keep getting away with it team. Like it's an absolute, again, I think there are a lot of justifiable picks here, but like I look at Cleveland and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And they don't have the pitching depth that they used to. They have the bullpen depth. They don't have the starting pitching depth that they used to, stuff like that. And they're my team. I look at them and I think they can't keep getting away with it. So I'm going with Minnesota. But I think that, like I said, I think this is a wide open division outside of one obvious team.
Yes, of course, outside of that, yeah. So, Mr. Sayre, why don't you go ahead and go next since I went second the last time?
Yeah, so I'm picking the Twins as well, echoing, again, a lot of the same thoughts that Craig had. I just like the depth overall on this team. I think they're solid. I think even if you just don't count on Royce Lewis doing anything, I think the lineup is still solid. They have platoon guys that they can mix and match. The rotation is really solid. It's not as good as the Tigers, but the offense I think is better than the Tigers. That's why I have them edging them out, Tigers out. But yeah, similar story. So the top 3 are super solid, and then whether Simeon Woods, Richard, and Chris Paddock don't pitch that well, you've got Festa or you've got Zevy Matthews in the wings. Or if they are pitching well enough, then they're pitching well enough, and you don't need those guys, or you use them in the bullpen. I think they've got the best bullpen in the league. I think the closer quality guys in the Twins bullpen, you could go 4 or 5 deep. So I think they're the most complete team in this division.
No. Okay. Fair enough. So we're going to make triplets here, and I'm going to pick the Twins also. You got to, basically kind of echoing what Craig said, you got to pick somebody to win it. And so I'm going with, as those of you who have followed me, over the years or whatever, know, I'm going with my boy Byron Buxton squad. I actually own a shirt that says Byron Buxton is good at baseball. So Byron Buxton from Baxley, Georgia, by the way, not too far from where I live, but anyway, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But actually, just like what Rich said, even without Royce Lewis, they might have the best lineup in the division. They have a great rotation. They actually, I would even go as far as to say, probably not the best top 7 in baseball, but in the conversation, right? Like, if you have to dip down to your 6th and 7th starters, they're teetering on the edge kind of thing. And kind of like what you guys were both saying about the bullpen, if they're leading after 7, the game is probably over. Because Jackson Duran, that sounded like a 80s band. Anyway, Griffin, Jax, and Yohan Duran finish things off generally very well. I also expect a big year out of their bullpen, out of a former favorite of mine as a starting pitching prospect who kind of couldn't hold it out or whatever. But I think Louis Varland is going to be phenomenal out of their bullpen this year. So yeah, that's I just think kind of like what you guys both said, they're the most complete team, they're the team with the fewest holes. You kind of chuckled at, like, say, for example, the Ty France signing when they made that, and then actually that turned out to be rather prescient because Royce Lewis got hurt again. Well, of course, who could have seen that coming? But yeah, bottom line is that I just think the Twins are just the best team of a collection of not super great teams. So there you go. Any thoughts, gentlemen? You want to move on to the West?
Whatever works for you.
I think I covered it.
Yeah, we'll move on to the West. Mr. Craig, who you got for us winning the West?
This is another one I don't have a ton of confidence in, but I'm going with the Rangers. I think it's a trendy pick. I've seen a lot of people taking them, so I don't necessarily expect to be alone on this, but I think you could go a number of ways among the top 3 teams here. They're really close among our projections. I just think that they have the highest ceiling. This is different for me than Boston or Minnesota, although you could argue Boston has the highest ceiling in the East too. I just think those two are probably the most complete teams. I don't think that's true of the Rangers, but I think the Rangers' high-end outcomes are significantly better than basically any other team in the West's high-end outcomes. And they have so many potential options to hit those outcomes. I don't know how many of them will. Again, I don't have a ton of like a high confidence interval on this one, but you could make the case that they have more question marks than anyone else. We just did our AL West preview pod for my podcast, Baseball Prospectus 5 and Dive, and I said this there, but you could go basically down every single spot on the 26-man roster and say this is a question mark. What in different capacities, but if you want to go down their lineup, are you going to? We know some of it's who's going to play. But we know Marcus Semion's going to play. But is he going to be the sub 700 OPS version of himself, or the 750, 800 version OPS version of himself? Wyatt Langford, are we getting the second half Wyatt Langford, or the guy who kept his head above water in the first half? Corey Seager's going to be whether he's going to be on the field or not. We know he performs when he's on the field. Josh Young, can he get on the field? Adolis Garcia, again. Is he on the field? And if he is on the field, is he performing like the guy we saw 2-3 years ago or the guy last year? Again, Jake Berger, you'll probably just get the Jake Berger season.
Right.
Maybe not a question mark there, but is it going to be an upgrade on what Nathaniel Lowe gave them last year, right? Jonah Heim, big time performance question marks. Maybe Jock Peterson is the actual only one who doesn't have a question mark, right? Like you just know you're getting a good long side platoon guy out of him. But it extends the rotation. Leiter, Rocker, DeGrom, right? Maybe Nathan Eovaldi is the most solid name here in the rotation, and he usually misses some time, but he's grown into a more durable starter as he's gone into his mid-30s, but he's still a guy with an injury history in his mid-30s. So I think there are some questions there. That said, think about all the high end, the names we all know, and we know them because we know they either had the potential once upon a time, or we've seen it at the major league level. And I just think they have so many lottery tickets, so to speak, right? Like if they hit one or two of these, they're probably going to be fine. If they hit three of them in terms of either getting on the field or high end performance, they could potentially run away with the division, because I don't think anyone else kind of has those options. The big weak spot, as I said, this is not a complete team, is the bullpen. But if you're going to be weak somewhere, you'd rather it be the bullpen. It's the most fixable thing. They have options in the minors to potentially backfill. You could see Emiliano Teodo come out. He's a starting pitching prospect, but you could see him in relief potentially second half of the year, something like that, if they need him. We'll see. They've rebuilt basically their entire bullpen. It's just not full of guys you necessarily trust right now. But again, those guys turn out year after year. You just don't know which ones they are right now.
Right. Yeah, that's funny, actually. It's like a old school, oh God, what was his name? The San Diego Padres general manager who always churned out bullpens out of nowhere. Anyway, I can't remember his name now, but yeah, to your point, if you're going to be weak one place, be weak in the bullpen, because it's the easiest place to upgrade. So,
exactly.
Mr. Sayre, give us your West winner, if you will, please.
Yeah, for sure. So I really like the Rangers as well. I love what they've done on the offense side of the ball in the offseason. I think it's, going to be a big improvement from where they were last year. I think could be in top 3 runs scored in the AL. I just think there's too many questions in the rotation. And I think the Astros, they don't have quite the same depth and quite the same high end on offense, but the rotation is much deeper. The bullpen is better. And I think they're going to edge out the Rangers. So I'm going with the Astros. I think, I agree 100% with what you said, Craig. If the guys that we know come through like they can come through, like a DeGrom, if he pitches most of the season and he's healthy at the end of the year, I think if Rocker does what he's capable of doing, if Leiter puts it together, I think this could easily be one of the best teams in the league and could definitely take the division. But there's just too many questions for me on the starting rotation. So I ended up having the Astros kind of edge them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to echo your sentiment again, Mr. Goldstein, and go with the Rangers. And I kind of led off just by saying just dangerous. Right? Their top three. Sorry, I'm not using warp. But their top three. No, yeah, I'm not being brand loyal right now. But their top three hitters in the lineup project for over 13 Fangraphs WAR. And then if DeGrom is serious about, we've heard him talk about dialing it back a little bit so that he can stay on the field a little bit more. He gives them, say, he's not giving them 180. He's giving them 130 innings, right? Yeah. I bet they probably end up needing another starter. Kind of like what you were saying about the Royals, because you can't get by with 6 starters all year or whatever. And especially not when, some of them are Jacob DeGrom, Tyler Mahle, Nathan Eovaldi, and 2 rookies, but I'm betting on their star power over Seattle's inept offense in spite of the Rowdy Tellez signing, and Houston's ever evaporating offense is what I said. Houston, I'll talk a little bit more about Houston in a second, but Houston is kind of my version of Cleveland, what you were saying, Craig. Like, how do they lose a superstar every single year and keep making the playoffs? Like, how is that possible? But they just keep doing it. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the Rangers. I do worry. I talked about this in the fantasy stuff. I do worry a lot about Semien and Garcia. I'm a big believer in the idea that defense is the first thing to go. And Semien's defense was still there last year, but his on base was terrible. And Garcia's defense was not there, and his on base was terrible. So we'll see. They could both bounce back. They're not especially old and whatever, but that can be a sign of lost athleticism, and then everything falls apart really quickly. So we'll see. But nevertheless, picking the Rangers to win the West. Why don't we run through our wild card picks real quick, and then we'll take an intro, what do they call that? We're going to go to the lobby and get ourselves a snack kind of thing. No, I'm kidding.
Intermission.
Yes, an intermission. So, Mr. Goldstein, you want to give us your 3 wild cards?
Sure. I have the Orioles, Astros, and Blue Jays. Actually, I know. You're saying, yeah. I've been a higher person on the Blue Jays the last few years. I actually was not heading into this season, and I really the Cole injury and Baltimore's rotation as spring wore on just really influenced my thinking. Okay. I was very prepared to like the Orioles if they could just either backfill Burns in some capacity or Grayson Rodriguez didn't get hurt, something like that. But you look at their rotation, and I think the Orioles are going to win. I picked them for second place in the East, and I think they're going to have, I think I picked them for a wild card. So I don't think they're going to be bad, but they're going to have to win a lot of games, 7-5, 8-6. And they have the offense that can pull that off, which is why I think they're here. But I do, and they have the pieces to go get a pitcher. I don't know if Mike Elias is capable of bringing himself to do it, but they have the pieces to do it, right? Someone else could do it potentially. I think they need to go get, Sandy Alcantara or someone like that. Especially, look, they're not carrying Kobe Mayo. I think it's fine to have redundancies. I don't know that he makes the Orioles better right now, but I do think they owe it to themselves to figure out what he is. And I think he is right. What Kobe Mayo said was right about they're not going to find out at AAA. He's either going to do what they think he should do, or he's going to do less than that. And you're just not going to find out what he is while he's down there. So I think they're just kind of wasting time on that front. But I do think the offense is very good. I think, Adley played through an injury last year, and he and the team are pretty insistent that it wasn't the cause of his kind of offensive decline. But you can pretty much trace it back to that injury. Yeah, everything tanked immediately right after, and he played through it, and that's, credit to him. But they also played James McCann at catcher a lot, so he could DH. These are not the kind of things that you do if Adley Rutschman is healthy. I think he could have a really big year if he's back, and I think I don't see any reason he wouldn't be back from that injury. And just up and down that lineup, obviously Gunnar Henderson is at the top of that, but up and down that lineup, they have a lot of contributors, and they have the pieces, kind of like I was saying with the Red Sox, to either backfill or fill in the cracks if they need to trade from their system if someone isn't performing for whatever reason. The Blue Jays side of this is I was actually surprised at how good Max Scherzer has looked. I am concerned about his thumb. I don't expect him to give them a full season, but I don't think they need one necessarily out of him. And I actually really did like the Santander signing for them. I know it feels it's a big drop off from chasing Soto. They missed on Sasaki. They missed on Ohtani the year before. He is not the level of free agent or any kind of acquisition that those guys were. But we shouldn't let that kind of influence how good he can be. I mean, that's a 47 home run hitter that they just added to a lineup that desperately needed one. Bo Bichette has looked healthy this year. I really think a lot of his issues last year were due to health. He's a very variable player anyway. There's a lot of kind of, this is gonna be a weird comp, but Tim Anderson to his game in terms of how often he puts the ball in play and how subject he is to the kind of up and down kind of BABIP or just kind of where he ends up going with the ball, because he puts it in play so much and he doesn't lift it as much as you'd like him to. And I think we're honestly just going to get another big season out of Vlad. And I think the pieces around them, Alan Roden, I don't want to oversell Alan Roden or anything, but I think he can hit. I don't know where he'll play necessarily. But again, I think you look at these guys and suddenly the lineup looks a little bit longer than it did in the offseason. I think this has the potential to be the 5th place team in this division, as Rich was saying before. They could sell very easily, but they've been signing themselves up to just ride this out. If I thought if they were going to sell, I thought they should sell. I thought they should have sold Vlad and Bo and Chris Bassett and whoever wasn't nailed down. I thought they should have sold last summer, to be clear, but they didn't. And they picked up, Jake Bloss and Will Wagner. And again, I think Will Wagner can hit. I don't know where I'll play, but I think he can hit. And so we'll see. They have options. They're not as good options, which is why I have them as a 3rd place team as some of these other teams. But I think, I don't know. I just think they're going to stick it out. And I think they might end up 3rd in what's going to be a really messy division ultimately.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's my case for them. The Astros, Rich touched on it. They're still a good team. The biggest concern for me on the Astros is just what happens when one of these guys in the starting rotation gets hurt. I love the change Hunter Brown made. I love Framber Valdez at the top of the rotation. I really like Spencer Arrighetti. I know he's getting some helium over the course of the offseason. I think it's deserved. I like Hayden Wesneski. I'm interested to see what they can get out of him, right? Yep. But what happens after that? Because the depth that they've always just had another guy. They've had Hunter Brown. I picked Ronel Blanco as a breakout guy last year. I liked him, and that was my one. Don't worry. But that worked out really well. I really liked him. They pulled him out, but you can't keep finding these guys, right? At some point the well runs dry, and that's my big concern on the Astros on why they're not in 1st. I think they'll do enough. I mean, they're carrying Cam Smith out of camp. I think that's a really smart move on their part because the outfield was a train wreck. So yeah, I still really I like the Astros. I just think I'm really worried about what happens if someone in the rotation gets hurt, and they've had a lot of injuries in the rotation the last few years, so I'm not convinced they'll necessarily avoid it. But if they can get a Royals year out of, in terms of the rotation health, I think they'll absolutely be in 1st place, but I don't think they will, which is why I put them in 2nd.
Yep. So, all right, fair enough. No, Rich, I'm going to go ahead and take my wild card next, if that's all right.
Yep.
So I have the Red Sox, the Astros, and the Blue Jays also.
Oh, okay.
So who knew, right? So the Red Sox, You kind of touched on it, Craig. Obviously, they've got all these moving parts, and they've got these up and comers being Anthony and Campbell, and even guys that were on the roster. Rafaela might take a step forward. Who knows? Maybe David Hamilton turns into something. There's just guys. And so I kind of wrote them down as they're kind of like the Love Boat of wildcard teams. They're exciting and new. So they, but I think they make the playoffs for sure. I don't see them making necessarily a deep playoff run, barring picking up another big starting pitcher on the trade market or something like that, which they certainly could do. But I think given what the Fenway faithful has had to put up with over the last few years, the on-field product has not been great. So I think the Fens will gleefully take a playoff appearance. As for the Astros, I just, like I talked about it a minute ago, I don't get it. They lose, Carlos Correa and Alex Bregman and, Justin Verlander and just player after player. And yet they're still projected for 6 hitters with at least 3 Fangraphs WAR. And then, like Craig, what you were just saying, I do think their pitching depth gets tested a lot this year. And I don't necessarily see them having the farm system to go out and get another starting pitcher of any consequence anyway. But betting against the Astros of the last, say, almost 10 years, not quite 10 years, but 8 years, let's say, has become a fool's errand. So I'm not betting against them this year. And then as far as the Blue Jays go, Rich, you know this very well. I am thoroughly convinced that this is the best defensive team in baseball. Dalton Varsho leads the majors in defensive runs saved over the last couple of years. Andres Gimenez is the best defensive second baseman in baseball. Alejandro Kirk just got $1 gazillion because he can frame better than anybody but Patrick Bailey. And Ernie Clement, of all people, I want to say had 10 defensive runs saved in half a season last year, which is pretty incredible. So they're all excellent. They have a staff full of just kind of solid starters. It's kind of like one of these classic, like 1980s teams. They're going to keep you in the game every 5th day kind of thing, And so I think they take advantage of it's kind of a down year for you always think of the East as this monster division, and we've talked about that ad nauseum already. The East is not that division this year, and I think they take advantage of a down year for the East, and they punch their ticket to the postseason tournament this year. So that's who I've got for my wild cards. Mr. Sayre, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to take a moment to say that I'm not on board the Blue Jays bandwagon. I guess it's more the conventional wisdom. I think the offense looks really bad. You've got Vlad, obviously. I do think Bichette's going to bounce back. I do think Santander is good, but you've got 5 starters, including a couple of platoons with 100 WRC plus or below. And I'm also not totally bought in on this story about the defense. You got Kirk, obviously, you got Jimenez, you got Varsho, fantastic up the middle defense, but you're giving a number of those runs back with Vlad. If Santander plays the field at all, that's not great. Springer is falling off a cliff, perhaps before our eyes. Roden is nothing to speak of on the defensive side, and I'm not buying the Clement 10 runs last year. So, and I don't see really any upside in the rotation. I don't think Gossman is going to bounce back to be ace type pitcher, and then you got a handful of guys that are like 4 or 5 guys. Maybe that's underselling them a little bit. So I just don't see how they get there. Respectfully, I'll mention that. My wild card teams, I've got the Rays. We talked about them a little bit. I love the rotation. I think they ride that during the season. We'll see what happens with the park and the rainouts and all that stuff. So I have them second in the division. I love the Tigers as well because of their rotation also. I think they've got a top 2 or 3 rotation in the majors. A lot of questions in the bullpen. Bullpen's not great. I think they've got some talent on offense. I think the Parker Meadows injury actually hurts the team a lot more than people realize. He's a good defender, fantastic hitter second half of the year last year. I think he was a big part of that team contending. But I do think the rotation carries them enough to get them into the wild card. And then I've got the Rangers as well in the wild card and out of the West.
Interesting. So yeah, the Parker Meadows injury you bring up is an interesting point because it's coupled with Matt Bierling injury also, who conceivably could have helped keep the ship afloat kind of thing.
Yeah.
It can play center field or something, whatever. So yeah, that's interesting. So that was Rich Sayre's hating on the Blue Jays portion of the program, which is ironic because Rich works for a Canadian company in his day job, but.
Wow.
So yeah, there's that. So Mr. Goldstein, we've reached the midway point of the show. Everybody who's listening to the show, I gotta believe, knows about Baseball Prospectus, but why don't you tell them anyway?
Sure. I like to think of ourselves as a kind of an online magazine. Essentially, it's a little bit different than where you're coming to get your news from, but we're going to do in-depth research. We have proprietary metrics. We have, I know obviously this is normally a fantasy show. We have a fantasy team that writes every day. We just wrapped up our entire positional series where we did, I think, at least 12 articles on every single position. We did very deep dives for AL, only league teams. We do a dynasty ranking for every position. We do overviews for every position, stuff like that. And we also have a prospect team. I mentioned our number one, or Roman Anthony was our number one prospect. I talked about it with Christian Campbell as well. So we do a top 100. We did top prospect lists for every team. That's all up on the site right now. Those are kind of the off-season projects. We're very excited to get the season going. We introduced, we don't have the metrics on the site yet, but we got some really cool stuff on like Arsenal metrics where we're doing, obviously Stuff Plus is a very popular thing. Our version is Stuff Pro. We have Pitch Pro, which includes location, but these are Arsenal metrics developed by one of our staff named Steven Sutton Brown, who's an absolute genius. But it kind of weights and takes into account how good someone's pitch mix is. So, there is a value to having a third pitch, a fourth pitch, a fifth pitch, and it matters how good they are, how well you use them, how well you sequence, things like that. We're starting to crack into kind of putting some number values on those type of qualities, which is really cool and exciting research. I know you were talking about defensive metrics. We've got an update to our defensive metric coming out soon. We're overhauling our player cards. It's a really cool community. I know you're a subscriber. I've been talking to you online for quite a while, David. And I know you guys are both there. I think it's a really cool community. We have really thoughtful writers. Stephen Goldman just wrote a phenomenal piece on Jackie Robinson. I know he was in the news recently. It was riffing off of that. It was honestly one of the pieces I'm most proud to have run on the site. But we do. It's hard, you're saying like, let people talk about it, or talk about this, let people know about it. It's hard to encapsulate everything we do. Mm-hmm. We really spread our arms really wide and take a variety of approaches. We're not afraid to be weird about something, to have fun with something. We also are very serious. We do a lot of hardcore stats and analysis as well. I think there's really something for everybody at Baseball Prospectus. And one of the key things I've been hitting a lot over the off season is we are a subscription site, and I know not everyone can afford. There are a lot of subscriptions out there right now, so I know not everyone can always afford, or they have to pick and choose. But we're $45.95 for a full year. It's $46. You get access to everything I'm talking about, including our projections. We have some really cool proprietary injury tools and analysis. It's very important for fantasy as well. We have a database that you can look at with someone had an injury, tells you the average time they got back, the median number of days they got back from that injury. You can limit it to specific body parts, specific types of injuries, things like that. It's a really helpful tool to gauge all of that kind of stuff, right? And it's there's so much there that any one part, I honestly, and I really I hate making sales pitches, but I really believe this. Any one part of our site, I think, is worth the subscription site and the subscription price. But you get all of it for just that price. And we want to keep it that low for everybody. We intentionally underprice ourselves. We want people to be able to access it. We want people to be able to celebrate what we're celebrating every day. And so yeah, I mean, please check it out and sign it up and sign up. If you're not signed up for something, but you think you want to read something, send me a message. I'll probably put it in front of the paywall. I'm really not trying to keep people from what we're doing. But we have survived as a site from our inception as a subscription. And again, I mentioned the price is $46 for a full year. Basically, it was $40 when we launched in 1997. There has been inflation since then. We've raised prices once. It was $6. But look, we're not again, it's not trying to rake people, we're not trying to get money off of people. We're trying to survive as a site and thrive as a site and be extremely worth the subscription. I think if you look around at places that do the stuff that we do, you're going to find a lot of higher price points. That's not an indication of, and I'm not taking shots at them, it's not an indication of our quality. It's that we intentionally price ourselves where we are because we want people to be able to take part.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It is as kind of you alluded to, Craig, it is the one-stop shop for a baseball fan, no matter what your particular niche may be, whether it's, like you said, the Jackie Robinson, the history of baseball, whether it's fantasy baseball, whether it's prospects. Baseball Prospectus is prospect. I don't want to Jeff, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Paternostro.
Jeff Paternostro is I think your lead prospect writer right now, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm not trying to jinx you in any way, but Baseball Prospectus alum from their prospect side of things are working all over baseball right now.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So if you're not reading, if you're either just a prospect maven or a fantasy player who uses prospects in their league or whatever, and you're not using Baseball Prospectus as one of your tools, your league mates have an advantage on you. So I couldn't stress that far enough. Their fantasy content's great. Oh, friend of the show, Russell Carlton, unbelievable work. He's one of the best baseball
for
writers.
2 different teams. He writes. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to brag. We won the Sabre Award. The Society for American Baseball Research does 4 writing awards every year. Last year we won all of them. This year we won 2 of them. And again, there's so much quality baseball work being done out there. So when I talk about that, it's not a brag. It's an honor to be able to say that, honestly. We have had, as you mentioned, we had someone from our prospect team this year get hired by the Red Sox. We have people all over. We have people on our stats side that get picked up by teams as well. We like to think we do professional quality work and give the public access to it. And, we might not match everything that they've got, but we've got really smart people thinking and talking about this stuff. And I think there's a lot to learn, and we learn a lot from our communities too. From our commenters, people suggest stuff in our comments. We put out articles the following week or 2 because we're interested in what other people are thinking too. The other part of it is just everyone who's there and reading our work and communicating with us. They're part of what makes us great. And I'm not saying that just what they give to us, but you can learn from other people in the comments too. We do. I know I do. And so we're really lucky to have that. They, iron sharpens iron kind of thing. There are a lot of smart people reading the site and they make us better. We're all better off for it.
So, that's great.
I've been a subscriber for a long time. Yeah, for sure. One of the first providing what I would consider real quality prospect content. And then, like you said, there's so much more than that. I actually really like the annual as well because it's not specifically fantasy content. It gives you a different perspective on the team in general, what the direction they're going in, what the front office is thinking about. And then you got the individual player capsules as well. So, I think it's a fantastic resource if you're a fan of baseball.
I really appreciate it, and I also want to say, just very quickly, we have another tier of subscription that is specifically for fantasy folks. That is our bat signal. It just tacks on our bat signal. If you have questions, we turn around and answer, and I always say 24-ish hours. It's sometimes a little bit longer, but we try and return an answer around in 24 hours. And it's just you and the person. And the fantasy team sees it, but whoever responds to you. So it's not like a public chat where everyone's going to to benefit from your knowledge or from your, from the other person's knowledge answering your question. It's 1-to-1. And so you're going to get a bespoke answer to your question. I think people have found a lot of value out of that. We've answered over 12,000 questions since we launched that. So it's a really cool offering. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I personally use the bat signal a ton, and I actually would argue with you, Craig, that because you said something that's a little over 24 hours. My experience has been that it's oftentimes much less than 24 hours.
It should, yeah. We try and get one. We try and do it within 24 hours, but I like to build a little time in there.
Undersell and over deliver kind of thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, fair enough. No, yeah, but baseballprospectus.com, can't recommend it highly enough. $46 for a year worth of entertainment. It sounds like a great deal to me. So,
you know it. If you're not subscribed, you got to try it out.
Yep.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, so we'll dive into the National League. We'll try and zip through these. Craig, you want to lead us off with your National League East winner?
Yeah, I went with the New York Mets. I think this is a dogfight in the top three teams. I think they're all actually whereas the AL was kind of you have to choose one. I think you get to choose one of these three teams here. They're all really good. I have a few concerns about the Mets rotation coming out of spring training, but I also think if you're going to be missing people, April's kind of the time to do it. You can build in some off days. They can skip a start. You also have kind of the freshest arms for your backfills, right? So we're going to see. That seems like Griffin Canning has been a lot better with the Mets than he has anywhere else. I am relatively high on their kind of pitch development and how it's come along the last few years. So I'm willing to bite a little bit on what we've seen out of Canning. And I just think David Stearns has shown the ability to build a bullpen. He found a few pieces last year. It wasn't enough. They were kind of running out of gas in the bullpen last year, but he found some keeper pieces in terms of Reed Garrett and Dedniel Nunez and guys like that. He's got another year to kind of assemble a larger mass of players to sort out. We're seeing some hype on guys like Max Kranick and guys like that. So I think they're going to be able to fill those gaps. And look, I think the lineup speaks for itself. It's Juan Soto. They brought back Pete Alonso. We'll see about the defense. I'm a little worried about Mark Vientos at third base, stuff like that. But I think they've got one of the deeper lineups. They're going to get Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea back in the rotation. I'm a big fan of Kodai Senga. I believe in him, and I love his ability to miss bats. I just think this is a really talented team, and I think they've got some. It's not like actual momentum. I don't think it carries over from the regular season, off season into the new season. But I think the organizational momentum is they're David Stearns is doing things in a really smart and detailed way, which is just not inherent to this franchise. So there are a lot of reasons long-term history-wise to doubt any momentum for the Mets in that sense, because I think a lot of times in that case it was accidental. I think Stearns is a really sharp guy. I think he's meticulous about how he puts the roster together. And again, I think they have the ability mid-season, if they want to call up Brandon Sproat, if they want to turn to some of these other arms that they've been developing, or move one for a piece that they need. I think they have the willingness to unlike maybe Mike Elias, they have the willingness to pull the trigger on a deal like that if they need to. And I think they have the pieces to do it if they need to as well.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, Mets are beastly. I am not quite as confident in the rotation as maybe you are, but they certainly are going to be right there to the finish line. So
again, Clay, I was just going to say Clay Holmes, another thing about the beginning of the season is like Clay Holmes, my biggest question on him is, what's he going to look like in August? But that's not an April concern. And if Montas and Manaea aren't piling on the innings in April because they're on the shelf right now, maybe that actually works out a little bit for them.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't, but we'll see.
Yeah. Mr. Sayre, your pick for the East, if you will, sir.
Yes. So I like the Mets as well, but I think the Phillies edge them out. Love the rotation again. That seems like it's a little bit of a theme I've been on with some of these teams, but elite rotation. The bullpen I think is very deep as well. There's a lot of options there. You have a strong lineup core. the lineup does fall off a bit in the second half of the lineup. We'll have to see who they mix and match in there, or how guys perform at the back end. But I just think the rotation is too strong. The bullpen is too deep. And I actually think Andrew Painter makes a big impact in the second half as well. And I think that kind of carries them into the playoffs and beyond. So I think they edge out the Mets a little bit. I actually have the Braves as well in the mix, but I have them third in the division. We talk about that if we bring up the Braves at all. But that's what I'm seeing for the NL East.
Fair enough. So you mentioned something about bringing up the Braves, so that's a perfect segue. I know my co-host Rich, I know you feel otherwise, but the offense just simply has to be better than last year, right? They are super thin at the bottom of the lineup. They have no bench, but they have an unbelievable rotation. I would actually put their rotation right there with the Phillies and certainly ahead of the Mets. They have a solid bullpen, not a great bullpen, but they do have a solid bullpen. And then the Braves seem to have a unique talent for always having random big leaguer X hanging around at Gwinnett, their AAA team, which is just about 45 minutes away from the big league club. I would probably get a rise out of you guys on this one, but like they recently signed Alex Verdugo just to go play at AAA, right? And just like break glass in case of emergency, right? Like if Jared Kelnick,
I think he's expecting to be on the. He's going to AAA because he didn't have a spring training.
Certainly, no, I get it, but just the point is that like last year with Ramon Laureano, or they just always have this guy who's hanging around in AAA, or
right. But I think he got a major league deal, so I think he will be in the.
He did. Okay, gotcha. Fair enough.
I think so.
Bottom line, though, is that I just feel like the Braves are going to be back, atop the division this year. I think that, like I said, I do think they have the best rotation in the division, even over and above the Phillies. And Alex Anthopoulos has shown a willingness to augment the roster at the deadline when needed. But really, I think we're kind of splitting hairs here. Any one of these three teams could win the division, and any one of the other two teams absolutely could not. So the Nationals and the Marlins will be playing baseball this year, so enjoy that. All right, why don't we move on to the Central? Who you got for us, Mr. Craig?
Yeah, I got the Cubs. I honestly think this is one of two teams. I guess we'll see what you guys think, but I think it's the Cubs or Milwaukee. I do think this is just the Cubs here. I think finally getting a high-end, a truly high-end performer like Kyle Tucker is a big move for them. I think they should absolutely sign him to an extension. They haven't done that, but I think for this year, it doesn't matter. They've long been a team full of chock full of 2-win players and just not having the upside that you really need. I think Tucker gives them that. I even they just announced today, Ben Brown is going to be their 5th starter. Yeah. I think there's a low floor there, but there's a high ceiling there as well. I really like his ability to miss bats, and I think in a 5th rotation spot, why not take a shot to see what he can give you in terms of that ceiling? Their rotation is probably the biggest concern for me, but I think they might have one of the best defensive units in baseball, like you were talking about the Blue Jays, between Swanson, Horner when he's healthy, Pete Crow Armstrong now in center field, Ian Happ again can probably spot you in center field, but he's in left. Right field, Tucker, again, someone who can probably spot you in center if you need to. And then we'll see Matt Shaw. I watched those first 2 games in Tokyo. I thought his arm was a little bit lacking at third base. We'll see if he can clean that up a little bit, but should have the glove to be there, if not the arm. We'll see what happens there. But he gives them maybe a little bit of upside too. Third base was obviously a sore spot for them last year. They went and got Isaac Paredes, but maybe he gives them some upside with the bat. I just think their rotation isn't necessarily something to get excited about, but this is the Central here. They're not all going to be perfect teams. They're not as exciting as I would take any one of the 3 teams that we just talked about in the East probably to win the Central if they were there, but they're not there. So I think it's the Cubs. I like Milwaukee. I think they're another team that's a little bit like, how can they keep getting away with it? They keep kind of doing less and doing less and doing less and still winning. I buy it a little bit more than I do when I said that about Cleveland, but I just think I don't know. At some point there's a thinness to the roster as a whole that I think gets exposed, and I think this might be the year.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so you mentioned about the Brewers. I'll go ahead and take this next one if that's okay, Rich, because I did pick the Brewers to win the Central, and this is going to be probably my most abbreviated pick because I just don't kind of like what you were saying, Craig. I don't really have any conviction behind any National League Central team. And frankly, I'm going to even go as far as to say that you could tell me that the Pirates or the Cardinals won the NL Central at the end of the year, and I'd be surprised but not stunned, right? Like, all right, I guess that happened. It was like Paul Skeens won 30 games or something. I don't know. So bottom line is, when in doubt, I'm going to stick with gravity. And they won the Central last year, so they're going to win the Central again this year. And maybe the best player in the division, which is saying something considering we just talked about Kyle Tucker. They have Jackson Chourio, and I think he's due for a monster season. So I'm going to pick the Brew Crew to repeat as NL Central champs. Any thoughts, gentlemen? Or Rich, you want to give us your pick?
Love Jackson Chourio. I really, I think, he's going to be the next kind of superstar in the league. I really like his trend that he's shown for a couple of years now of making these adjustments, improving at each level as the season's gone on. Fantastic offense on the Brewers. I think they have one of the worst rotations in the league. Peralta is obviously very good. I don't like any of the guys behind Peralta. I'm a lot of questions about Woodruff coming back. So I actually am not a big Brewers fan. I took the Cubs as well in this division. I love the defense. I love the lineup. I think it's solid top to bottom. I think Shaw could add a lot to that, but even if not, again, I think it's solid top to bottom. And there's some more questions at the back end of the rotation. Matt Boyd, Ben Brown. Ultimately, I think I like Ben Brown more as a bullpen piece, but he looked good in fits and some of the starts that he had last season. So you may as well run him out there. I do think they have some options. They could go to Cade Horton at some point if he's healthy. So I just think they're the most solid team again in this division. I like the way the Reds are going. I don't think they have the lineup depth, and the Pirates have pitching, but they lost Jones more than likely. I don't think anything's actually been announced on that yet.
No, there was good news announced today, actually, that no ligament tear, no surgery needed. They're going to just not have him pitch for 6 weeks and revisit after that or whatever. But good a news as you could hope for when a pitcher goes down. But
it sounds like Garrett Cole. But anyway, last year. But so I took the Cubs, and then we'll jump on to the West.
All right, fair enough. So, gentlemen, which of you would like to lead off with the Dodgers first?
Yeah. I mean, I'm taking the Dodgers. I think. I don't know. We could talk about it, but
yeah. All right, fair enough.
I think they're going to win probably by 10 plus games, right? I mean, they're projected for 103 wins for our system. I think pretty much everyone is in the same ballpark.
I think there's 3 other good teams in this division, and it's still not going to be a particularly close race. I think they have the best lineup, the best rotation, the best bullpen. They have depth like insane.
Right.
So yeah.
So all right, so fair enough. I'm picking the Giants to win the National League West, and I'm not kidding. This is as anybody who knows me personally or has read any of my work or has listened to any of my shows, or our shows rather, Rich, I'm sorry. I'm a big believer in quote unquote narrative. And I believe the Giants are this year's the power of friendship team. They're going to just kind of congeal, and Willie Adames is going to bring something. Matt Chapman is going to bring, the veteran, whatever. There's just a kind of a special vibe that I've just got a feeling about this team. They have solid starting pitching depth. They do have a good bullpen. They actually have a bullpen, as somebody wrote an article today about it. Possibly, now I can't remember where it was, but anyway, about how the Giants have one of the most diverse bullpens in the league in terms of different arm angles and that kind of thing that they attack you with. They have a decent lineup, and they have a beautiful ballpark. So they face I'm going to call my shot. They face the Dodgers the second to last week of the season for 4 games. I'm going to say they take 3 of those 4, and then they close the season with 6 games at home against the Cardinals and the Rockies, and they beat up on those guys, and they win the division by 1 game. So we can look back on this and laugh at me when I'm horribly wrong, but I just like the Giants this year for no especially strong reason other than I don't know. Just every year there's a team that comes out of nowhere, and that's my team that comes out of nowhere this year is the Giants. So
look, no one had them win in 107 games when they beat the Dodgers in 2021, but
right.
I'd be surprised.
Right. Yes. So, all right, let's zip through our wild cards for the National League. Mr. Craig, who you got, bud?
Yeah, I mean, I took the Phillies and the Braves. I have the Phillies in second place, the Braves in third place in that division. Basically, Rich and I flipped the Mets and the Phillies, but otherwise had it the same. And then I went with the Diamondbacks in the West. I think the Diamondbacks are a really good team. I think again, I said something about the NL East teams winning the Central. I think the Diamondbacks would run away with the Central if they were playing there.
Oh yeah.
I think they're a legitimately really strong squad. I just think they're going to have a really good year. I think they got, the bad first half from Corbin Carroll. I think that's going to be in the past. I expect a really big year out of him. And they have really nice players at almost every position. I like, the changes they made to their bullpen when they picked up AJ Puck last year. That was a real weak spot for them. But getting him, Justin Martinez, obviously just signed an extension. They believe in him. Kevin Ginkel, they have a nice core in the bullpen. And look, when Corbin Burns wants to pitch in your location, what a treat. I have been a massive Corbin Burns fan for a really long time. I think the number of innings that he provides, at the quality that he provides them, he's an absolute number one starter. So I am a Dodgers fan, but I love watching the Diamondbacks. Honestly, they're so much fun as a team. And honestly, the biggest question I have with them is what's going to happen with Jordan Lawler, because they've kind of boxed him out at every position, which is fine to have that depth. But, I was really hoping to get a firm grip on what he's going to be. So I'm hoping he gets a chance. I don't want it to be as an injury expense or anything like that, but I'm hoping they find a way to work him into the lineup and we figure out a little bit more about him, because he could be pretty exciting too.
If Jordan Lawler's history tells us anything, it'll be his own injury that it'll excuse.
Good, fair point.
Yeah. So, Rich, I'm gonna take the next one on the wild cards, if that's okay, just because I have a lot to say similar to what Mr. Craig just said about the Diamondbacks. So I've got the Dodgers. Obviously, I don't have them missing the playoffs. I've got the Dodgers, the Phillies, and for all the same reasons we've already talked about. Dodgers may be the greatest team ever assembled from a 40-man roster standpoint. The Phillies have this wonderful rotation. I do worry a little bit about Schwartz might be hitting a wall. Trey Turner lost some sprint speed last year and played not as great of defense as he has been in recent years and whatever. So I have a little bit of worries about the Phillies. Their bench is pretty atrocious. But the Diamondbacks is the real one I wanted to talk about. And I really, really love me some snakes this year. Like you said, I think Corbin Carroll and Ketel Marte at the top of the lineup. Corbin Burns and Brandon Pfaadt, yes, I said it, are fronting the rotation. And then Martinez and Puck at the back end. I'm not quite ready to commit to them as appointment viewing, but I think that they're an easy on the eyes squad anytime they're on. If you're up late, or if you're on the East Coast, you're up late or whatever. If you just want to catch a ball game and the Diamondbacks happen to be one of your options, I think that's a fun team to watch. So, Mr. Sayre, your wild cards, if you please.
I like the Diamondbacks a lot as well. I have them second in the NL West, actually. They led the league in scoring last year. I think the players that they swapped out are going to more than hold their own. They lost Christian Walker. They lost Jock Peterson. But I think the Josh Naylor acquisition, the Pavin Smith and Randall Grichuk platoon is going to cover that. So I think they're going to be super dangerous on the offense side of the ball again. Like Craig mentioned, the Corbin Carroll, starts of the year seemed a little bit fluky. So that could, help drive that further. And the rotation is rotation on the bullpen is rock solid. They're a fantastic team. So I have them in the wild card. I have the Mets as well. We talked about the Mets. I actually have the Padres edging out the Braves. I think they're going to be neck and neck, but I like the Padres a little bit more overall. I like the rotation that they have. I don't dislike the Braves. I love Schwellenbach. I love Strider. Don't know what's going to happen with Sale this year. The way he ended the year last year, not even being on the playoff roster, who knows? Reynaldo Lopez, I don't know that he's a 1.99 ERA guy again. So I like the top of the Braves rotation. I do think there's some question marks. And then same thing with the Giants. They have the pieces in the rotation, but they also have a lot of questions. Verlander, we don't know exactly what we're going to get from him. We don't really know what we're going to get from Ray. And then they got some rookies or some other guys in the 3, 4, 5 spot. So I'm got Diamondbacks, Padres, and Mets.
Fair enough. All right, so we're running a little late here. So instead of going through each LCS series, why don't we each just call out our World Series winners, and then let's end with the fun of the disappointing teams, if that's all right. So, Mr. Goldstein, who do you got taking home the crown this year?
Yeah, I'm just gonna. I guess call me a homer, just taking the chalk, but I'm going with the Dodgers. I think they have the best chance. I don't think it's a guarantee or anything like that. We say the best chance. I think our World Series odds have them at like 19%. So again, that's just how baseball works, right? It's a big open field, especially, and small series can flip the script a lot. They almost lost to the Padres last year before they ended up winning it. But I think they're the team best situated to do it.
Yeah. I was actually talking to a buddy of mine earlier today about, you mentioned just, the Dodgers being 19% and playoffs, anything can happen and so on and so forth. Like, and I made the point to him that you could literally stick the White Sox in a 3-game playoff series and they might win 2 games. It's possible.
They won 2 out of 3 against the Tigers in the midst of the Tigers streaking to the playoffs.
Right. That's right.
Last year. So you just never know.
Yep.
So, all right. So I'm going to go with my pick, Rich, which is again the San Francisco Giants to win the World Series. And I know this is an off the board pick. I've got them beating out the Rays in the World Series. I'm going with a couple of teams off the board here, but and Fox or whoever's carrying the World Series these days is desperately hoping that I'm wrong. But that's who I've got. Rich, who you got, bud?
I've got the Dodgers as well. Maybe a little bit boring, and it doesn't always play out the way you think it will on paper, but it's hard to pick someone else at this point for me.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. Mr. Goldstein, you are entitled, endeavored, whatever you want to. Would you like to give us a disappointing team for this year? A team that has maybe high expectations and won't live up to them?
Yeah, I'm a little worried at this point. And I'm trying to focus on like the point about expectations. Obviously, there are going to be some disappointing teams, just in general, as a matter of fact, right?
Right.
But I'm a little worried about Detroit right now. I know we talked about them earlier. I know, Rich, you mentioned the rotation. I'm a massive fan of Jackson Jobe. I'm hoping he really gives them a lot and serves as a really strong number 2 to Tarek Skubal. But you mentioned a number of teams with really strong rotations, and I don't disagree with you at all on those rotations. But it's really scary to me at this point. From what I've seen over especially the last decade of baseball, to hang your hat on a rotation, just because you watch Shane McClanahan when he walked off the mound and you think, oh, there it goes. It's all up in smoke. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that's being risk averse. I think you can absolutely win on those teams. But it's scarier to me to do it. And the lineup is in such tough shape right now. And I think it is a shame. You mentioned the Parker Meadows injury and how it maybe impacts more than people think. I think that's a potentially devastating injury. They didn't take off till he came up. And it's not just that he was a brand new hitter, because he was, but he's a monster defender out there too. And when you put Riley Green in a corner, him in center field, and they were playing Matt Vierling, who can cover center field capably in right field, and they have a big outfield. You have a really, really talented outfield defense. And I think that really changed things for them when he came up and hit enough and really hit more than enough to hold down that job thanks to his defense. And so I think losing him was a blow, but sure, you can get by with Matt Vierling, except Matt Vierling is also hurt. And so they were trying to get by with Wenzel Perez, but Wenzel Perez is also hurt. So now they're running Ryan Kreidler out there in center field. They're going to have to play Kerry Carpenter in the outfield. He's not that bad. I know he was always a DH, but they had really good defenders. He's not that bad in a corner, but that means you're talking about Justin Henry Malloy in the lineup or someone like that.
Or Spencer Torkelson, like we've been talking about.
Or Spencer Torkelson, who they bumped off, in favor of Colt
But
Keith.
you don't want Carpenter to tweak his back or something playing, playing in the outfield. Yeah.
There are all these things, and look, I sit here and think I don't think Gleyber Torres is a dominant second baseman or anything, but thank goodness they signed him because look at their lineup right now, and I know that's not their lineup for the rest of the season, but you pull it up and you look at it and you think I don't know how they're going to make 500, much less make the playoffs. That's my concern. I mean, and the answer is the pitching, right? They have a really deep bullpen that AJ Hinch knew how to use, especially in the second half of that season. But I'm sitting here thinking like Zach McKinstry. I love Kerry Carpenter as a hitter, but there is another side to that platoon. They're going to have to pull him in late game situations against lefties. He just cannot hit lefties. Torkelson, Keith, Trey Sweeney, Jake Rogers, like these guys can't hit. Manny Margot is on this team.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to take a shot at anyone's pick. There's upside here to be had. But when I think about like the recipe for an underperforming team, boy, like there's a lot of boxes being checked right now on that front, just in terms of the offense. Look, Tarek Skubal can cover for a multitude of sins. If Jackson Jobe is right, so can he. Reese Olson is good. Like he's a solid pitcher. Jack Flaherty, that's another signing that fell into their lap, even if he's not what he was last year, right? Like that's just another competent starter in that rotation. But boy, Jack Flaherty has had back issues, right?
Yeah.
Or performance issues. Jackson Jobe has had back issues. Alex Cobb is already hurt. So you run down the list and it's like, it's just a recipe that makes sense to me. I don't want to see it. I loved watching them. And I hope it doesn't happen, but that's a team that I could see underperforming expectations this year.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, no, that's raised some rather salient points. Mr. Sayre, do you want to go with your favorite disappointing team, or do you want me to go with my favorite actual team, who's also going to be my favorite disappointing team?
You wanted to close it out, I think. I kind of
do. Yeah.
So let's do that. I was actually worried Craig was going to steal my thunder because he mentioned this a little bit earlier in the show. My favorite disappointing team is the Cleveland Guardians. I was a Guardians fan for many, many years, back to the Manny Ramirez, Jim Thome era. And I actually gave that up. And it's just frustrating because the front office, I feel like, is one of the best run front offices in the league. They're constantly able to turn up guys from places you don't expect, lower draft picks, pitchers that they turn into success stories, scrap heap guys that they get production out of. And then to have that resource and not bother to supplement it with any like real players or sign the players that you develop it just seems like it's a waste of time. So we did this show last year. We did our preview show. I had pegged the Guardians last year as a 75-win team. If any of the 8 or 9 people that watch that show want to call me out on that, you can certainly do that. Because they did. They had a great year. They won the Central, obviously. I was wrong about that. But again, I just think they outplayed expectations more than anyone else in the league. If you look at the team the way it is now, they're so fortunate that Jose Ramirez decided that he wanted to take a way under market value deal and stay on the Guardians. Outside of that, you have Kwan, solid leadoff guy. He did have a rough second half behind maybe some bad luck. Maybe you have Manzardo if he takes a step forward. Maybe you have Santana if he doesn't take a step back. The rest of the lineup, you've got guys, 4 of those spots had an under 70-ish WRC plus last year. just a terrible offense. And then you go to the pitching side. I love Bybee, ace talent. I like what I've seen from Gavin Williams in the spring this year. He didn't look great last year coming back. You know, I know he's coming back from injury. So is that real? Is this spring real? Is he going to get to that ace potential? We don't know. Is he going to get hurt? We don't know. And the rest of the rotation is just like replacement level guys, and there's no depth anymore. There's not like this stable of guys coming up. So I think what you said earlier, like how do they keep getting away with this? I don't know. They have an elite bullpen. They've got Clase, they got Cade Smith, they got a bunch of other guys, but the talent on paper is not comparable to the Twins, the Tigers, or the Royals. And we'll see how it plays out this year. Maybe I'm wrong again. I just don't see how that's possible.
All right. Fair enough. All right. So I get to close with my boys, the New York Yankees. So those of you who follow me over on Twitter and may have seen, I said about a month ago, before the Eric Cole injury, before the Luis Gil injury, I said that the New York Yankees will finish with a losing record this year. Not atrociously. It was like 79, 83 kind of thing or whatever, but a losing record this year due to the abject failure of ownership to put together any sort of insulation on this roster. And I'd like to prove that to you. I'm going to just run through very quickly 5 names that are on the actual New York Yankees, like the most famous franchise in all of sports, opening day roster. And let's talk about them a little bit. Carlos Carrasco is one of them, who I absolutely adore as a human being. But Carlos Carrasco has been sub-replacement level 3 of the last 4 years. Ben Rice. Remember Ben Rice had that big 3-homer game, and everybody was so excited about him last year, right? We all remember that. That was so cool. He had 23 hits the rest of the year. Okay? Oswaldo Cabrera, career WRC plus of 80. 80. Great number if you're Jerry Rice. Not great number if you're WRC plus. Paul Goldschmidt. The corpse of Paul Goldschmidt was signed to be our first baseman instead of re-signing, for example, somebody like Gleyber Torres. I know he bounced back in the second half last year, but the first half still existed, 87 WRC plus. And then Carlos Rodon, who, as Michael Kay said in his final start, I know he bounced back somewhat last year. He was serviceable last year. 1.7 Fangraphs WAR, but the year before also was sub-replacement level, gave up 10 runs in his final start without recording an out, and I watched that game live, and Michael Kay said that's probably the worst performance he's ever seen by a starting pitcher. So these 5 guys, and that's our opening day starter, by the way, guys. So these 5 guys are on purpose New York Yankees. I just don't see what happens, kind of like what you were talking about, Craig. What happens when these guys get hurt? Like, who's the backups to Oswaldo Cabrera? How much worse does it get than Oswaldo Cabrera and Ben Rice and Cookie Carrasco? I'm terrified for this season. I gotta be honest with you. I know we have Judge. I know Bellinger's having a big spring. Jazz Chisholm could have a good year. I get it. There are pieces here. We signed Max Fried, but I just think there's lots and lots and lots of potential for 2 or 3 guys to get hurt, and now you're really, really looking at the thin roster. So
yeah, I mean, I have them 4th in the division following the Cole injury. I think they were in the mix for first. Before that, it is look. A lot of these problems existed otherwise, right? You said they didn't build out the infrastructure for this roster.
Sure,
but they've been doing that for years at this point, and you know that. And my concern is you're talking about what happens when those guys get injured. Is you go back to 2023 and what happened when Judge got hurt.
Yeah.
They were in the mix. They were in the mix for the first place all year. He gets hurt, and they're 5. They fell to a 500 team, right. And there's probably less infrastructure now than there was at that point. I think there's some upside too. Obviously, Judge provides a lot of it. Fried provides a lot of it. I think we've seen Ben Rice is hitting the ball harder than he ever has in his career.
I have seen that.
I understand the concerns. I'm not trying to wave those off, but there's maybe some upside to balance that. But yeah, it is concerning that they didn't go out and do more. Again, Fried. I love the Fried signing. I love Max Fried, but their rotation. Will Warren, Marcus Stroman is in this rotation after making noise after getting bumped.
Right.
Once you get past Warren, though, I mean, you said Carlos Carrasco. It's Austin. Alan Winans. I do that every time on our on my podcast. I don't know why I call him Austin. Alan Winans. Like these are not even those. These aren't even quality emergency names at this point.
Yeah.
You'd almost rather have seen them throw a few $1 million at Jose Quintana, right? Just that you could have had him, right?
Kyle,
you could have been
Kyle
here,
Gibson.
right? Yeah, Kyle Gibson, right? And so yeah, I share the concerns. I do not think they're going to have a good year. I do think. Again, there is some upside there. I don't want to say it doesn't exist. I don't think this is an out and out bad team, but it's not the right division to be a mediocre team.
Yeah. You know what? It is not a bad team. It reminds me of kind of like what you were saying. It's not a bad team. It's just not. It's the you know what it is. The antithesis of the Diamondbacks. It's not a fun to watch team.
No.
Right.
Agreed.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah. So. All right, well, that'll do it for this evening. Mr. Goldstein, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight, buddy. This was really, really fun, and really got a chance to pick your brain and talk ball with you, and that was really cool, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on, guys, and thank you for being subscribers and letting me talk about BP. And seriously, it was great to talk with you guys, and I'm sorry I ramble so much. I know I blew our allotted time, so
that's all right.
Sorry about that, but it's at this point I just have to own it. It's not going to change. It's just how it's going to be.
I don't think you'll find either me or Rich complaining about talking baseball too much as listed among our primary concerns ever.
More content is always a plus, yeah.
Right, yeah, no doubt. So, Rich, any closing thoughts real quick?
No, appreciate everyone watching, and looking forward to the next one. And thanks so much, Craig.
So,
Thank you,
thanks, guys. All right.